What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Lineman Life Live. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. It's been a slow day, I feel like, in the sports world, but I appreciate you guys for being in here. We are going to talk about a few things today. Won't keep you too long. But before we get started, make sure you slap that like button. Hit that subscribe button if this is your first time on the live stream. And share this video, share this live stream so that we can get some work done with this YouTube algorithm, because let me tell you, it's a wild one. It is inconsistent, to say the least. And, you know, the more you guys can do to share this live stream, the better. So let's get into it. First and foremost, and I'm kind of happy that this entire thing came up, because fact of the matter is, this has always been kind of a behind the scenes kind of a debate between athletes, between football players in general. And I wouldn't really even call it a debate. I would call it more of a crazy discourse, because out on the practice fields, you often have banter between players, offense, defense. Generally, the line go back and forth. Oh, you guys can't hear me? All right, let me turn this thing up. Turn it up. Bear with me. I'm over here. I got a crazy little setup here, because I'm coming to you guys live from the void. Can you hear me better now? Should be better. Let me know in the chat. Anyways, defensive linemen and offensive linemen have often argued amongst each other, and people have often debated about what each side really brings to the table. Some people will say, well, the offensive linemen, they're generally just big guys, strong guys who get in the way. But there's always been a question about athleticism between offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Now, generally, when you talk about that, you talk about like the left tackle and the defensive end. That's where everything kind of starts. So you would say, or you generally would hear that the left tackle is generally the most athletic of the linemen. And, you know, and in a lot of cases, that may be true. A lot of cases, that may be the most athletic of the linemen. But there is no doubt, if you watch football, if you truly understand the positions on the field, there's no doubt that offensive linemen are athletic, much in the same regard as defensive linemen are. Now, the thing with guards generally is that a lot of times good offensive guards in the NFL did not start off as guards in the NFL. A lot of times you find that guards are former defensive linemen, like myself. When I started playing football in high school, I was a defensive end. And it was what I wanted to play. When I got to college, I was a defensive end my first, year and a half before I got moved to the offensive line. And you find that a lot of guards in the NFL or a lot of the good ones have good feet, because it comes from those roots at defensive line. So there's some credit to be given there to the defensive line for contributing to the athletic ability of some guards you see play football on Sundays. Now, this gentleman here had a little bit of a snafu in putting his foot in his mouth and saying something that really kind of put him in the crosshairs of many pundits in the NFL today. And Javion Clowney the clown man himself has come out and actually made comments about offensive linemen. We're going to go through this article real quick. Then I'm going to show you guys some things just to kind of set the record straight, so to speak, when we talk about a situation like this. It says here, Browns Jadeveon Clowney. So it's so fitting for the Clowney part of his name, his last name being Clowney, that he would make a clownish statement like he did. But he says, Browns Jadeveon Clowney comments on playing inside, gives NFL guards great bulletin board material. Well, the Browns signed Jadeveon Clowney to a 1-year, $8 million contract in April. They envisioned him thriving alongside all-pro defensive end Myles Garrett and causing all sorts of problems for opposing quarterbacks. It was a low-risk, high-reward addition for a team that is hoping to build off its run to the AFC divisional round. Cleveland plans on moving both Clowney and Garrett around on the defensive line, occasionally featuring them on the interior. Clowney understands playing inside requires a different mindset. True. But he doesn't sound too concerned about facing guards instead of tackles. Let me get this thing straight. This thing is bothering me. All right. This is the statement that he said. He said, "We love the matchup," Clowney said during his Thursday media availability. We feel like they're the unathletic guys, the guard position. They're not really real athletes down there. So they're just physical and maulers. But we try to get in there and create those matchups for certain guys, and hopefully, we get some wins. Okay, so at face value, I guess you could say that he's taking shots at offensive guards. I mean, clearly he's putting it out there that he doesn't believe that offensive guards are athletic. But I certainly, through my career, in all my games, always looked forward to when defensive ends would come inside. Pause. So, look, you got to look at it like this. Defensive ends come inside. When I'm in a game and a defensive end, I mean, I've gone against guys like Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, who've come into the interior line in 2-minute situations. And honestly, it's much easier when I get defensive ends who can't come in to pass rush from the inside, because these guys don't know what they're doing. These guys are kind of lost because it's a different game on the inside than it is on the outside. And to a certain extent, he is right. We get to maul you a little bit on the inside, but it's not even really about mauling you, because the physicality is one thing, the size difference is another, and the confined space is ultimately where defensive ends kind of lose the advantage. There's not a lot of space to work with. So when you're in a situation like that, there tends to be a lot of defensive ends who kind of get stuck on the inside. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had that situation, and it really took, I wouldn't say minimal effort, but it wasn't like I was trying to stop, a big burly 300-pounder. It wasn't like I was actually having trouble keeping him from moving around. As soon as you get your hands on them, which oddly enough, on the interior of the line, they tend to not really use the athleticism that they have to try and get an advantage in pass rush. You get your hands on them, and from there, it's just a matter of leverage. And they don't know how to get off of leverage for the most part, at least in my experience, playing against defensive ends in the NFL. So, but if you don't want to believe me, of course, there's evidence, because the internet is always and forever undefeated. And here we have an example of just that. And I'm going to run this little clip, and then I'm going to break it down for you like I do, because it is actually juxtaposed to everything that Jadeveon Clowney just said. And like I said, it makes him look like a clown to come out and say something when there is video evidence like this out there in the world for everyone to see. Jadeveon Clowney, Quentin Nelson, I think the video evidence speaks for itself. He's getting dominated. He's getting out muscled. He's getting out athletic. I don't even know what word to say with that. His athleticism is completely nullified by Quentin Nelson's athleticism. He tries to do what you do on the outside to somebody on the inside who has good feet, who has good hands, who has great strength, and he gets dominated. So let's bring this back just a little bit. Just a little bit. RESPCT. Find out what it means to me. So, I mean, first step, obviously, again, look, on the inside, it's a different game. There's not a wide area for him to work with to the outside. He has to face up Quentin Nelson head up. He has to actually engage head up. There is no sweep the edge, get around the edge, dip a shoulder. That's not happening in here. And you see, he tries to get a little cross. I mean, and come on, let's remember this. Over the last 2 seasons, Jadeveon Clowney has averaged 1.5 sacks. So you can even start there, and that's enough for anybody who is thinking about giving credence to what he's saying. That's enough for them to think again, because this isn't somebody who's actually even been able to expose any offensive tackles over the last 2 seasons, much less guards. And the moment he comes inside, I like what Quentin Nelson, he's got his feet on the ground. I mean, this is shit resolution, obviously, but I can see what's going on. I know what's going on here. He's got his feet on the ground. He starts with his hands a little low, but as soon as Jadeveon gets in range, boom, he shoots his hands. Now, he is trying to get inside, so he has to react to this. He plants that left foot in the ground, and he pushes off and starts to redirect. Now, he's not going flat down the line, but he's also not turning his hips, which, if you've been paying attention to my breakdowns on offensive line technique, that is what gets a lot of tackles and a lot of guards in trouble when they get beaten pass protection, is they open the hip and it allows for a free run or easier access to the quarterback for the defender. Right here, he sinks it. He's actually pushing his hips forward to flatten Jadeveon from getting any further penetration. Jadeveon tries to do a jump hop. That's another move you would do on the outside. He tries to jump off the edge to turn his hips. No, look at where Quentin Nelson's hands are. His hands are inside. Jadeveon Clowney's hands are outside. He has no leverage whatsoever. He is completely handled right now. And what does Quentin Nelson do? He continues to push his hips, run his feet, and now just watch the whole house of cards come crumbling down, because step by step, he just literally pancakes Jadeveon Clowney into the ground. We call this he's close to a teabag. He actually ran him through he came through so powerful with this pancake that he almost did a front flip. He almost did a front flip. And look, Clowney is trying to kick him. That's somebody who's mad. He's mad. He's trying to kick him. This is all you need to see to disregard the ludicrous statement that Jadeveon Clowney has made about playing on the inside with the big boys. With the big boys. He looks like a clown. Now, to further drive home the point of athleticism on the line, whether it's offense or defense, let's take a look at some drill work by Jadeveon Clowney. This is drill work with no pads, wearing helmets, so it must be around OTAs or maybe early in training camp. But let's take a look. This is a simple enough drill. You see defensive ends go through this all the time. They swipe the hands, they go through, they knock the pads to the side. You gotta move your feet, you gotta pick up your feet, you gotta be athletic. Let's take a look at Jadeveon Clowney as he displays for the world to see his amazing athleticism. Next. Look at this. Pick your feet up, son. Oh, man. Now, this isn't for me to sit here and say that he is not an athlete, but what the point of this is that when you want to stand up and talk shit, you should know that there's film of you doing something goofy. There's film of you looking bad. And that goes for any player in any sport, in any situation. Somebody can find film of you looking unathletic, of you looking like somebody who doesn't really have a clue. And here we go. Jadeveon Clowney. Going through the pads, gets tripped up, gets stuck, can't even get his feet up to save himself from falling. That's what we call unathletic. That the first thing your coach will say to you there, and I've seen this before, the first thing your coach will say to you there is, hey, be an athlete, be an athlete, be an athlete. So, Jadeveon Clowney should think twice before making these kind of statements to make himself look foolish. And I mean, come on, let's go. You know we got to go through the comments. We know we got to go through the comments. Okay, and then you look at this here. But what people don't know about this play that he had in college was that the guard that was supposed to block him just completely left him and let him run free. So he had a free run. That doesn't mean anything. Oh, man. His name fits him. Guess he forgot his feet that day. The only people who are offended by what he said are the ones who know they're unathletic, or were when they played, I guess I should say. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. It's just it's a ludicrous statement because we're talking about professional athletes here. We're talking about pros. You think you think that it's just, there's people in the NFL who just have no athleticism at all, but they're there? Maybe long snappers. Joe Zinka, what's up, man? Long snapper in Jacksonville. He 14 years in the NFL as a long snapper. Completely unathletic, but he can snap that ball. He made some plays too. He made some tackles. So, I mean, there is athleticism at every position. If you look, if you understand what the position requires. But when you come out there talking, hey, this is one of the best guards in the NFL. Some would say the best guard in the NFL. Doesn't look like you didn't look too athletic against him. I can tell you that. He actually looks like the better athlete here. He's able to turn. He's able to slide. He's able to move laterally, keep you from cutting through the line, and then he actually moves you backwards and pancakes you. I mean, this is literally the definition of athletic. That is athletic. This is an athletic play by this offensive lineman here, and he's by himself. And again, a guy who has 1.5 sacks. Averaging 1.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. He went to Seattle, did nothing. Was in Houston, did nothing. I think he was in Tennessee, did nothing. I mean, come on. Come on. Would you like whipped cream on that pancake? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give that one a like. Yeah. Would you like whipped cream on your pancake? I mean, this is not, I mean, and okay, yeah, there are people here who are saying, oh, well, Quentin Nelson's a generational talent. Look, man, I promise you, this isn't the only offensive lineman who's done something like this to him. This is not the only guy. If you watch Jadeveon Clowney play, he is a bull in a china shop. And another word that we use for players like that he is OC. He is generally out of control. He just runs forward. He's strong, he's fast, but he doesn't have any real awareness as to what to do once he gets to a point of contact. We've seen it in numerous situations across different teams. That's why a lot of teams didn't really want to sign him when he was a free agent. Nobody cared. Nobody cared because he's an average defensive end. He's no. He is below average. That's why they're thinking about using you on the inside. Because they want to find somewhere to get an advantage. And, look, they'll find out soon enough. He don't want that smoke. Because if he has to go inside and it ends up being something like a run play, he's going to get bodied. Get the body bags. He's going to be getting rolled out of Dodge. Rolled out of Dodge. Yeah, that's right. Let's see. What we got over here? Oh, we got a super chat. Mexican Iron Man for $4.99. Mexican Iron Man, what's up, brother? On the road, I see. He says, last thing I want to do is go inside and get hit by a Uche guard concrete wall. I mean, look, man, like I said, there were times, and, don't mind the sweat. I've got these bright-ass lights up here. Got me glistening. It happens every time now because I turn off the AC and got the bright lights. Makes me sweat. But, the thing is, it's a different game. Like, I've played at the tackle position, in practice. You know what I mean? During 2-minute drills, just to get the work. Coach asked me to go to, play right tackle during this 2-minute drill. Okay, cool. And I tell you, it's a different game. It is a different game. Now, I did fair enough. I held my own, but it is not the same as being at guard. So someone who's a defensive end should not expect that it would be the same kind of game going in to play at the defensive tackle spot. It's just not the same. And there's even more to it, that when you're a guard, sometimes you get center help, and that center knows going up against a guy like this, he's lightweight. That center is going to try and come and blow his ribs out, take him right through the rib cage as he comes to help on a block. So he'll, a center might kind of play off a little bit and keep his eyes there. And once, a guy like Clowney tries to come inside, like he did on this, you would have that center just come and boom, right through his rib cage. When he tried to make that jump, he would just get smacked right there. I mean, I've been a part of those kind of blocks on numerous occasions. Those DNs, they go right back out to the outside when those kind of things happen. I remember this was my second year in the league. Dwight Freeney, we were playing the Colts. I think it was a Monday night or a Sunday night. Can't remember exactly. And this was kind of in reverse because he was lined up at the end, but he was running a stunt to come inside. So the defensive tackle who was over me went away to the other side of the line. So I was in a help position where I could actually rotate out to help the tackle on his block. And this was something that we actually had set up by design, that if we have a certain protection, I was going to go help on Dwight Freeney. So this was like my first encounter ever playing against Dwight Freeney. And I just kind of did what I did in practice. I kind of kept a hand up where the center was, kept my eyes over there looking at the defensive end, and he did a spin move. He ran. I saw him. He was starting to run up field, so I started to come out to help, and he did a spin move, and it was so perfect because I timed my acceleration, and as soon as he came out of that spin, my shoulder pad went right through his sternum. And he rolled backwards. Dwight Freeney rolled backwards. He got up, did like this, and then he walked off to the sideline. I was like, yeah. And, our left tackle at that time was Khalif Barnes. He's like, good job, Uche. Good job, Uche. He walking his ass off the sideline. Look at him. I'm like, shh, don't talk too loud. He might be back, and I can't help you all game, bro. So, yeah, there's a number of different ways for defensive ends to get straight and mashed on when they come inside. So, the interior line it's phone booth warfare. It's close quarters combat. So if you're coming in there, you better come with a plan, because if you don't, get your head knocked off. And that's what happened. I mean, hell, it took one dude to do that to him here. So, that's kind of how it is. That's what we're looking at here. Now, moving on. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because, obviously football season's coming up. Football season's here, but regular season's coming up. And, people often ask me about fantasy football. And, I'll be honest, I don't play fantasy football. I have played it in the past, but I never really kept up with it. I know how to play it. Generally I know how to play it. But I do understand that fantasy football is huge. Fantasy football is really big, and it appears that it's not just in the U.S. that this is a phenomenon. So, I saw this article, came across this article, haven't read it yet, but it does go into the fact that fantasy football has become a global pastime, and it's built its own little culture in a number of different countries around the world. So we're going to go through this article real quick and then, kind of open it up and talk about it, because I don't really know what to expect, just because, again, I'm not always on fantasy football. I'm not on it like that. So let's go through this. It says NFL fantasy football goes global from Nigeria to the Philippines. It was 2018, and John T. Vergara sat a couple of rows back in a small Manila courtroom the week before Christmas as a hearing proceeded in front of him. Vergara, a litigation attorney who focuses on intellectual property cases, had time before his case, so he opened a fantasy football app on his phone. Vergara passed time by scrolling through the list of free agents, nabbing New York Jets receiver Robbie Anderson, and a move that paid off. Anderson scored 20 points, helping Vergara win his league championship by 0.4 of a point. It's funny because I hear about that all the time when people talk about fantasy football with me, about how the way that people win, it breaks down to like tenths of a point, based on performances the guys have in real life games, things of that nature. I get it. I really do. I can appreciate how people really get into fantasy football. I just haven't dedicated the time to it. So, sometimes I'm a little bit disconnected from my interest about it because it's I don't really play it. But I digress. Let's continue. It says, gotta love those fractional points, Vergara said with a smile on a Zoom call from the Philippines. Fantasy football may be American-born, but it's become an international hobby. Vergara has played fantasy football from the Philippines for the past 18 years, watching the game grow around him. About 40 million people play fantasy football in the United States, according to reports. In India alone, another 20 million play fantasy sports, and a number that could increase to 150 million next year, according to Business Wire. Daryl Michael Lim, who plays in the same league as Vergara in the Philippines, estimates the number of Filipinos who play fantasy football is safely in the thousands. Although the number of fantasy football players continues to grow around the world, it's still a niche market. Just more than 5% of ESPN's fantasy football players are from the outside of the United States. Expats, by and large, established the game on foreign soil, and its growth has been driven by the NFL's expanding popularity in other countries. ESPN talked to fantasy football players in Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Israel, South Africa, Germany, the Philippines, Guatemala, and Canada to learn about the fantasy football cultures around the world. The Nigerians. Yep, you can tell it's them. A fantasy football draft in Lagos, Nigeria. Chuma Nwuka. Oh, wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. By and large, playing fantasy football isn't much different elsewhere than in the U.S. Leagues hover around 10 teams. Commissioners have to decide whether to use PPR or standard scoring. Players stress the waiver wire and strategize about where to pick a quarterback or running back compared to a wide receiver. And players pay to play, whether it's in Naira, shekels, quid, euros, quetzal, or the Philippine peso. But the time difference can become a nightmare for those playing anywhere from Europe and Africa to the Middle East or Asia. In the Philippines, there's a 12-hour time difference. Yeah, that's gotta definitely make it difficult at least. Because you can't, you'd have to be up at crazy times to be able to catch the games. I mean, that makes for difficult playing. So if you're going to be, if it's growing like this in places where it's actually a bit of a chore to keep up with it, that says a lot about how much fun people are having with it. So that's pretty cool. It says in the Philippines, there's a 12-hour time difference ahead of the East Coast of the United States. When the 1 p.m. Eastern time games start, Viraga usually is awake, powering through the 1 a.m. kickoff. Damn. He'll wait up to monitor the inactives for the early window of games because they're in by 11:30 p.m. his time, and he tries to stay awake through the first half of the 4 p.m. games. But if the effort fails, he runs the risk of keeping a player in his lineup who may not play. Yeah, I guess he would, because you got to keep up with the injuries. You got to keep up with the actives, who's active, who's a late scratch. Sometimes you have that. You have players who really are maybe questionable throughout the whole week, and there's not an update on their situation until I think it's maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes till the game. That's when they actually have to have in a report on who's playing, who's up, who's down. So that definitely is something that you need to have information on if you're going to be playing fantasy football. But it says here, if I'm not up and I don't bench a questionable player, a doubtful player, I'm toast. It can be utterly frustrating. I get it. You pull your hair out because you lose sometimes in the head-to-head battle with the guys because you couldn't quickly make a change before the game, said Byron Nicole, who lives in Cape Town, South Africa, which is 6 hours ahead of the East Coast. Lim's current league grew to 20 teams during the pandemic. Most of the managers are from the Philippines, but there's one guy from Los Angeles and one from the Bay Area. If Lim wakes up to use the bathroom around 2 or 3 a.m., he'll find 30 or 40 messages in the league's Facebook messenger group chat. It's all fun, he said. We talk about fantasy football. We talked about the NBA, MMA, politics, everything. So it's basically really family. It's fun to have a bunch like that. I mean, and that's another thing that I kind of get the sense of because I have friends who play fantasy football. Is there's a little bit of a community. I mean, the community is obvious. You're going to have a community when you got guys who are getting together and having fantasy league drafts, and then everybody's communicating, talking about what they're doing, wheeling and dealing during the week. So yeah, that does tend to create kind of a community aspect to it, which again, that is good for fantasy football. That's good for football. That actually helps the sport itself become more popular outside of the U.S. So, hey, you never know. One day we may see football in the Olympics. It's a possibility. It could happen. But let's continue. Melissa Pfeiffer, who lives in Frankfurt, Germany, can watch the first window of games relatively easily because of the 6-hour time difference, but she'll go to sleep on Thursday and Monday nights with her fingers crossed because an 8 p.m. kickoff means it's 2 a.m. in Germany. That's too late for her, so she won't know the outcome until the next day. And that's the part that's got to bite. That's got to bite. That can't be fun. I mean, who the hell? I mean, you want to always know what's going on. I mean, it's almost a paramount thing. You got to know what's going on. But I mean, on the other end, maybe it takes some of the stress of it away, because I know people who stress out over this kind of thing too, stress out over playing it. So can play out both ways. If I'm ahead, then I'll be nervous. Like, what's the lead? I'll be nervous about that. Wiseman said. Oh wait, I'm sorry, wrong one. Let's go back up here a little bit. Got ahead of myself. In Israel, which is 7 hours ahead of the East Coast, David Wiseman, an Australian who moved to Israel in 2005 and started playing fantasy football about 7 years later, refuses to check on his team before going to bed on Sundays. Smart man. In countries such as Israel and Saudi Arabia, the work week starts on Sundays, keeping football fans behind their desk or being responsible with their sleep schedule when games are being played. Wiseman, who plays in a 12-team league, with the majority being American, knows he can't control what's happening with his team at that point, so he'd rather get a good night's sleep than toss and turn while his fantasy outcome racks his brain overnight. If I'm ahead, then I'll be nervous. Like, what's the lead? I'll be nervous about that, Wiseman said. And if he's ahead, then I'm like, I don't want to know about it. So now I'll wake up Monday morning. I just have to look at it without worrying, like riding every pass, every run. Makes sense. I mean, you can't help what your time zone is and how much that kind of screws up being able to keep up with the scores and keep up with the stats. For some international fantasy football players who are in multiple leagues, which seems to be the norm, with players from around the globe, the time changes can drive them mad. Chuma Onwuka. That's how you say it if you're Nigerian. A native Nigerian who's lived in London but now lives in Saudi Arabia, played in 4 or 5 leagues in 2020. He can't remember at this point with players from Nigeria, England, and the United States. He was constantly checking his watch to see what time it was there. Living in Saudi Arabia gave him an upper hand by a couple of hours because he is 7 hours ahead of the East Coast, while England and Nigeria are just 5. Those 2 hours can come in handy. Okay, so this is a Nigerian speaking here, so I'm sorry, I have to do this in my Nigerian accent. Here we go. When these guys are sleeping and I hear about news, it's their free agency, waiver wires. I start getting on there before these guys wake up, he said, which is pretty good for me. The drafts were a nightmare, Onwuka said, because the commissioners ran them on whatever time they lived in. He's dropping down to 2 or 3 leagues this year to make it easier to handle. What tends to happen on draft night is the London guys tend to meet super late at night because they always meet up at a pub or like they are doing a late night drinks thing, Onwuka said. So it ends up being like super late at night, their time, which is super early in the morning, my time, and even the Nigeria guys, the same thing. So I end up staying up early into the morning, draft night, yeah, for sure. You can't avoid it. There you go. That's my Nigerian accent. It takes Steve Janikowski about 5 minutes to walk from his apartment in Cologne, Germany, to Winehouse Vogel, a 123-year-old pub in the center of the city. Last August, as the ebb and flow of the pandemic trended downward in Europe, Janikowski and 8 of the other people in his fantasy football league found a large table in the outdoor beer garden and settled in. They had their draft kits laid out in front and their traveling trophy on display for everyone to see. 4 hours of drafting was ahead of them. Now, that's the part to me where I can't do it. That's where I can't do it. I can't sit there and draft people for 4 hours. I mean, I literally don't have the attention span for that. I don't have the attention span. I definitely wouldn't have the dedication. And you know, that would burn me out. That would really burn me out. Holy crap. So the draft is one of the most beautiful days in the whole year, I guess, for me. I mean, for you, I can't do that. That's too much. But first, it was time to eat and drink a lot. Like almost every other fantasy football draft that's held in person, food and drinks are as integral as cheat sheets and laptops. That night in Cologne, Janikowski's table drank Kolsch-style beer out of small glasses. A lot of it, he said. Most important part is the beer, Janikowski said. In Cologne, we have our own beer. It's a Kolsch. Those glasses are pretty small, so we drink several of them, but it's very refreshing and don't get too hammered. I mean, it is beer. They eat typical pub grub, said Pfeiffer, who's in the same league as Janikowski. That means schnitzel, sausage, met minced raw pork on half a bun with onions, sauce, and pepper on top, fries, and maybe a salad for a side dish. Local delicacies show up at in-person drafts around the world, such as suya in Nigeria, a thin strip of beef that's grilled and foiled onto a stick like a kebab and wrapped in newspaper. Yeah, that brings back memories. That brings back memories from childhood when we used to have those at Nigerian parties. That's crazy. Yeah, suya. Yeah, love that. They put pepper on it too, so it's like really spicy. But it's basically a kebab. It's like a very it's like a chewy kebab. You know what I mean? So it's good food, good stuff. However, among the fantasy football players whom ESPN talked to from around the world, most common food at their draft parties was as American as fantasy football: wings. Because wings goes with everything. You can use wings on anything. Sometimes the sauces are traditional American, like buffalo or barbecue. Sometimes they're not. In Nigeria, buffalo sauce is too expensive to import. Damn. Bimbo Banco said, but mayonnaise and ketchup are two popular ways to dress wings, along with a seasoning mix of curry, pepper, and garlic. I can see the curry, pepper, and garlic, but mayonnaise, I can't do mayonnaise. Can't do that. Chicken is the easiest food to order in Lagos, Banco said, making it the most popular option for drafts. In Guatemala, Jose Andres Ardon picked up wings from Pollo Campero, a chain that began in Guatemala in 1971 and has expanded into the United States. Local beers usually also reign supreme, such as San Miguel in the Philippines, which goes for about $1 a bottle, Gallo in Guatemala, or Star in Nigeria. Banco usually offers Heineken. Heineken is the beer of Nigerians on everything. Banco usually offers Heineken to the non-Nigerians as his draft parties, a safe choice for those from other countries. Yeah, that's true too. I mean, shoot. All my dad ever drank when it came to beer was Heineken. Wherever the draft party is and whatever they're serving, they seem to be growing across the globe. In Canada, Paul Gilbolt thinks fantasy football for the NFL is more prominent than you think and said it dominates the Canadian sports conversation until about October when hockey starts. When Vergara started playing fantasy football in 2003, he estimated his league was an 80-20 split of expats and Filipinos. Now it's more like 50-50, with more people who had no prior connection to the game getting involved. These past few years, that's actually caught me off guard, Vergara said. I've been in a keeper league for around 10 years now, and most of the guys there are local Filipinos. Now there are expats in another country somewhere living in the States, but almost none of them have any actual playing experience or are just fans of the game, and they all started here in the Philippines. So, very interesting article. I know it's a little bit of a long read, but I think that I think it's important to kind of like see this and know that this is the growth that the NFL is having. Internationally, it's just spreading its wings, and it's not even necessarily the game on TV that's doing it, that's bringing in the people. It's just the notion of the fantasy league structure. The fantasy league structure provides for kind of it's like a game. It's a mini game of sorts if you're thinking about it in video game terms. So people can get into those kinds of things because you're dealing more with just numbers. You have a touchdown equals this, you have catches equal that, you have, I don't know exactly how they calculate scores, but it really does boil down to sort of just, a game of numbers. And people can gravitate towards that regardless of where the sport comes from. So that's really cool to me to kind of get into this article and see that there really is a culture behind it. There really is a culture to fantasy football that goes beyond the U.S. I mean, that to me is always that's a cool thing to see. And I always felt like the more that football can kind of get picked up by other cultures around internationally, the better it is for the sport. Because again, like I've done consulting with football league in Japan, so. They love football. They don't watch football like we watch it. They basically get the Super Bowl every year out there, but they have, these semi-pro football leagues that are, partly sponsored and paid for by big conglomerates like IBM, Fujitsu, Mitsubishi. These are all companies that have stakes in these teams that provide, the salary, because the people who play on the teams also work for the company, and they provide for the facilities, they provide for the uniforms, and they got nice uniforms. I mean, there is a desire for a lot of different cultures to have football, and getting it into the mainstream with things like fantasy football, that provides nothing but a big benefit to the sport, a bigger benefit almost than the game itself can provide. So I think that's really cool, and I'm really glad that we got to take a look at that. So I think that's going to do it for today, guys. I mean, it's been a short day. I'm not saying a short day. It's been a slow day with sports news, and it's Friday, so I'm not trying to keep this thing going too long. I know that you guys are looking forward to getting into your weekend. Now, I might be going live here in a little while on Twitch, playing some games. I'll keep you guys up to date on that. But I think that, we can have a little early recess today, and we can reconvene and hopefully have a plethora of things to talk about on Monday after this weekend gets done. I know we've got some preseason games, I'm sure, this weekend. This is the last week of the preseason. So these are the last preseason games. I know that one game has been canceled due to Hurricane Ida. I think that was New Orleans and somebody. I'm not sure exactly who it was. And also, Saints name, Jameis Winston, started for week 1. I think we all kind of knew that. We all kind of expected that. So no surprise there. He had a hell of a game last week when it was him and I already forgot kid's name. Him and the other guy, the other quarterback, the backup, the utility quarterback. But he had a hell of a game, so he's going to be the starter. But their preseason game, I think, is canceled, so they'll be getting ready for their opening season game, their kickoff game instead. But everybody out there, I hope you will have a wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves, be safe, and I will see you guys again here on Monday. I am your observant lineman, Uche Nwaneri. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.